Hi class, this video is going to cover some cloth basics, and I'm going to be using Natalie's flame concept as a basis for this video. So we'll be using cloth, seeing how that works, and so let's look at what the result was. So this is what I created in Cinema to get sort of that flickery flame effect. So a lot of people will create particles to create flame, but I know Natalie was doing a very stylized version of her flame, and so I wanted to take a stab at using cloth to create this effect. So I want to show you how I went about doing this, and this is actually the render of the flame. I'm not super happy with the rough, well, I guess the very defined edge here, but it's something that we can work on. I know Natalie had her own material designed already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up a new file, project. And how I created this was I used just a simple sphere. My sphere doesn't have a ton of segments because cloth can be sort of cumbersome to calculate. And so because of that, I don't want to have a lot of divisions. And so I'm going to use a subdivision surface later on to make this look smooth in the end. And so to get the shape, what I'm going to do is I'm going to first turn it into a polygon. And then I'm just going to make it into more of this teardrop shape by selecting the point at the very top of my sphere, and I'm going to select my translate tool, and I'm going to enable soft selection. This will let me just pull this up into a teardrop without really having to do a whole ton of work, and so I'm going to turn off the soft selection so it doesn't affect anything else that I am going to do. Okay, so I'm going to turn this back and just to the object. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into a cloth object. And so I'm going to show you with just the outer flame, and then I'll do this again with the inner flame because just trying to figure out how to get that whole double flame thing. In order for everything to be affected by the same sort of forces, it needed to be one object. But I'm going to start with this just to give some basics as to how the cloth works. So cloth has a tag just like our rigid bodies, and so it's under simulation. And so the cloth tag, if we add it to our object, it's going to make it dynamic. And so if we play right now, the thing's going to drop. All right. Okay. So we have forces that are affecting it right out of the box. These are gravity and wind, those and air resistance. All of these things are affecting how the cloth is reacting. And so I could turn off gravity entirely, turning that to 0. You'll see that it won't move. I can change the gravity to go up. Whoops. So getting rid of that negative, and instead of falling down, that would fall up. Okay. And so I'm going to actually leave it with the gravity going up because I do want it to feel like it's a flame, and the flame is going up this whole time. But I don't want it to move. And so it's going to move until I pin it down. And so to pin down a piece of cloth, what we need to do is we need to go to the dresser tag. In the dresser tag, we can define fixed points. And so these points are going to be ones that don't move. And so I want this flame to stay in the same spot, so I'm going to select my points, and I'm going to go to the bottom of my flame, and I'm going to select all of these here. I want those to remain the same. So I'm going to go back up to my tag, so clicking on my tag, and I'm going to go to my fixed points, and I need to set them. So these now turn a different color. So we now have them in purple. These can be cleared if we want them to be. So if we're done, we don't want them to be pinned anymore, maybe we made a mistake, you can clear them out. And you can So you can see them in the purple. And so now if I were to, I'm going to go back to my object mode. If I were to play through this, see now it is sort of bouncing a little bit and it's stuck to that spot. And this is more of what we're trying to get at for that flame that Natalie was creating. And so now it's sort of got this little bounciness going on. So things that I can change here to affect the way that this looks are the forces. And so we affected gravity. So gravity is going up. So now this thing is falling upwards. So that's working well for us. And now we have to work with maybe the wind strength. So we can adjust how this is being affected by wind in the atmosphere in which it is living in. So right now my wind strength is at 0. If I place it up to 2, let's see what happens. Okay, so it's being knocked over. It's being knocked over because we have a wind direction of 1 centimeter, which is moving this thing in the z direction. Okay, so along that blue line that we're seeing there. So we don't want that, so we're going to change that back. We're going to get rid of the z direction wind, and let's change the y direction wind. We can change that up to 2, and let's see what that does. Okay, so wind is blowing the thing upwards. And so what I can do now, gravity's pushing it upwards, but there's also some wind going on. And so I can change the turbulence. So what turbulence is instead of the wind moving in one direction and is blowing straight, it has variation to it. So I can change this to be, I set it up to 3, and now you're seeing how it's blowing and it's moving a little bit more. You see we got our initial like wind there, gust. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for more of that bouncing up and down and moving side to side. So I might actually turn the wind, the Y strength to 1. Let's maybe like make it a little less intense. Okay, and you can see why I changed the turbulence. We get more of that back and forth type of feeling. Let's change the strength down to 1. So it's sort of flittering and floating and moving around, sort of like a little flame would. We can change some of these other properties, like wind drag and impact and wind lift. Let's change the wind lifts to 20%. Let's see how that changes. I'm not seeing a whole ton of change, but if I put it up to 100%, I know we'll definitely see a lot of change. And a lot of times when you're working with, okay, and so it's getting a little different effect. It's not very pronounced. But a lot of times when you are messing with some of these dynamics, you want to look at the extremes to figure out what each thing does. So looking at wind drag, okay, we're seeing this is wind drag at 20%. What happens when I put it up to 100%? And so by doing that, I get a sense of how it's affecting it. Okay, woo, all right, it's being dragged by the wind. It's being really pulled up when it's at 100%. And so I can see how it's affecting it. And so I'm going to say, maybe I'm going to put that even down lower to 10%. Okay. And see, that's not too bad. And I'm really trying just to get a very subtle effect here. And so it's moving just slightly to, be in, very sort of calm atmosphere where the candle's just sort of, the flame of the candle is just sort of bouncing up and down. And things that you can do here are like change the direction of the wind, the turbulence, the strength, all of that to get, and you can animate this. And so I'm going to put this up to 300 frames so we can see this a little bit more. I'm going to pull this up and so we can see the whole flame moving for about like 300. And you see how it's moving around, bouncing around. The turbulence makes it a little more, dynamic, and Not always the same. It doesn't move the exact same way. But I can come in here and change maybe the wind strength. So I might put a key maybe here at, let's do frame 100. I'm going to change the wind strength. It's going to be 1 here. Then it's going to go, it's going to get stronger. And at like 150, I'm going to change it to 2. Okay. And I need to also, whoops, actually set the key. Okay. I need to set it for 2. Make sure that I've keyed it. We have my keyframes there. Okay, and so it's gotten stronger there. It's subtle, but it's gotten stronger. I can then also maybe change the wind direction a little bit. So maybe, at this point too, let's see, maybe at 160, I'm going to key the X and the Z position for the wind. So I'm going to maybe bring in a little bit of wind from those two, changing that up to 1. Okay, and then maybe, woo, oh yeah, let's reverse this. Okay, so if the candle needed to blow in the wind a little bit, it could do that. And then we could bring those down again to 0. And key them both. And so we can orchestrate this a little bit more. So here is the wind's getting a little stronger. It's blowing more. And then it's going back to having less wind. And so I'm going to increase the amount of frames here just so I can see it, the wind decrease again. Okay, and so you can see that floating around. So when we're working with cloth, especially when we're working with objects like these, where we have a fully formed solid, I want to make sure that I use a low poly base, just because it does take time to calculate all these points. And so when I have less points to calculate, it's easier for the computer to keep up with me. So in order to smooth this out, though, I can throw this underneath a subdivision surface. So the subdivision surface helps the flame, and this is a stylized flame, as we know, helps it to feel rounder. Okay, and so we're getting that whole flame look, sort of cartoony looking flame, by doing that. And the subdivision surface just smooths everything out for us, which is really nice. And if you need your subdivision surface to smooth out more, keep in mind you can click on subdivision surface, come to here we have subdivision editor and renderer. In order to see it have more divisions, you have to do it in the editor, but in order for it to render, you have to make sure you click on the renderer as well. So you can actually have low divisions in the viewport if your computer's lagging, and it will still render. So these can be separate. These can be set at separate levels. Okay, but see, it's pretty smooth. It looks pretty nice. It's got that flame look to it. And then you can go and create a texture that makes sense for this the flame. I actually went and used one of the materials in the content browser. So if you go to the content browser and you go to presets, there's some materials that come along with Cinema. And so I used a material that, is it synthetic? Nope, not synthetic. I was working with, I think, effects. Yeah. So effects, there's these X-rays, and I used this X-ray to start building out a flame texture. And so what this looks like is something like that. But I can change it to be, whoops, I don't want that. I just want, so I have to, and actually this is looking way different than what I had used before. But nevertheless, interesting. Okay, it looks different than what I had going on before. Anyway, what I did want to look at here, though, before I put a texture on, actually, I'll maybe use this one so we can see through it a little bit better. I'm going to delete that one. I'm going to go back to my objects. But within, okay, so now my flame just has this, it almost looks like a transparent bag right now. But I'm going to use this so we can look through the flame to get the multiple levels that Natalie was creating. And so I'm going to do this again. I'm going to take this sphere and I'm going to make a duplicate of it. So I'm pressing Control to do this, just in case you forgot. I'm going to take that one, take the tag off of there. I'm going to move this over so you can see what we can do to make, I don't want to do that. Just go there. Okay. So we're going to make multiples of these flames. And I was just testing out a few things, but I wanted to have multiple layers of the flame in order to be able to, I guess, get that multi-level effect that Natalie had going on. So I'm going to take this sphere and I'm going to duplicate it again, and I'm going to scale this one down inside of the other one, and I'm going to pull it down so it's positioned correctly. So we're getting something that's sort of like this. So it's the flame within a flame. So in order to make these both, I guess, work together, so they're being affected by the same wind, they have to be a part of the same object, unfortunately. And so what I am going to do is take the two of these, and I am going to select them both, and then right-click, and we're going to connect objects and delete. Okay, so this makes, they're still independent objects, and I can adjust them by themselves, but now they're under one polygon object. And so whenever I add the cloth now, it will affect them both in the exact same way, which is good. So I'm going to take and add the cloth modifier to this. So I select it, right-click, and again go to Simulation Tags and go to Cloth. I'm going to do exactly the same thing I did before. I'm going to go to the dresser, and I'm going to select the points that I want to be included and be, and I think we are pretty awesome on that. It selected everything that I had. So I'm just selecting all of these bottom points, and I'm going to set those so they're fixed, just like I did before. And I'm going to change a few things about the forces. So I wanted this to go up, so positive. Whoops, not zero, just positive. And I want the wind direction to be just in Y. And I'm going to get rid of the Z direction. And I'm going to turn up the strength a little bit. Okay, I'm going to go back into Object. Okay, so those, now these two pieces are moving at the exact same rate. And you notice that, like, the shape of this is reflective of the shape of the candle at the point in time when I copied it, which is sort of actually cool. So if I put another subdivision surface here, there we go. Okay, so the thing that's important here is that these two pieces are moving together. if they weren't one object, they would not move together. I tried it where they're separate and tried to put the same settings on, but because turbulence is supposed to randomize, it randomized them differently and they looked different from each other. So let's just take a quick look at what this looks like. So you can imagine, like, we can change the color of this X-ray in order to make it look like it's glowing, like it's a flame, like I had in my other example. So I hope this lets you see how some of the capabilities that you can, some of the things that you can get out of cloth. I've used cloth for a bunch of different things. I even made earrings out of them. I took cubes and I let gravity take hold of them and made earrings out of them. And I really liked that. But cloth is fun to experiment with. So here, hopefully you get some baseline understanding of how it works, and you can start experimenting. So please, if you have any questions about this, let me know, and I will be happy to answer them. Have a great week.